Chapter 1. The Day the World Ended. Sarah Morgan braced herself as the pharmacy doors burst open, the horde of infected stumbling out into the street. Clutching a box of medical supplies, she turned and ran back towards the relative safety of the New York Public Library. Behind her, Chris and Max laid down cover fire, their weapons crackling as they fought to keep the undead at bay. "We've got company," Chris shouted, his voice strained with exertion. "Move, move!" Sarah pushed her legs harder, weaving between abandoned vehicles and debris-strewn sidewalks. The air was thick with the stench of decay, a constant reminder of the horrors that had befallen the once vibrant city. As they reached the library's grand entrance, Sarah glanced back to see Max and Chris sprinting to catch up. The trio burst through the doors, slamming them shut just as a wave of infected slammed against the reinforced barriers. "That was a close one," Max panted, leaning against the wall to catch his breath. Sarah nodded, adrenaline still coursing through her veins. "We need to secure the entrances and make sure no more get in." Chris moved to the nearest window, peering out cautiously. "The streets are crawling with them. I don't know how much longer we can hold out here." The trio quickly set to work, barricading the doors and windows with whatever furniture and materials they could find. As they worked, Sarah's mind raced, trying to formulate their next move. "We need more manpower," she said, wiping the sweat from her brow. "And supplies. This place won't hold out forever." "I know just the place," Chris replied, a glimmer of determination in his eyes. "But we're going to need help to get there." Before Sarah could respond, a voice called out from the shadows of the library's main hall. "Hold it right there!" The group whirled around, weapons raised, to see a young woman and a man emerge from the darkness. The woman had a medical kit slung over her shoulder, while the man carried a baseball bat, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Who are you?" Sarah demanded, her tone firm but wary. The woman stepped forward, raising her hands in a placating gesture. "My name is Maria, and this is my brother Danny. We mean you no harm." Danny eyed the group warily. "We heard the commotion and saw you come in. Didn't know if you were more of those things or not." Sarah glanced at Chris and Max, silently weighing their options. After a moment, she lowered her weapon slightly. "I'm Sarah. This is Chris and Max. We're just trying to survive, same as you." Maria's expression softened. "Well, you're welcome to join us. We've been holed up here for a few days, trying to figure out our next move." Danny scoffed. "I've been telling Maria we should try to make it to the Plaza Hotel. There's got to be more supplies and better defenses there." Sarah felt a spark of hope. "The Plaza Hotel? Do you know how to get there?" Danny nodded. "I've got a pretty good handle on the city's underground tunnels. Could be our best shot at getting there in one piece." Chris stepped forward, his brow furrowed in thought. "That's exactly where we were planning to go. Maybe we could work together?" Maria looked at the trio, a small smile forming on her lips. "I think that's a wonderful idea. Safety in numbers, right?" Sarah glanced at her companions, sensing a tentative agreement. "All right then, let's get moving. The sooner we can secure the Plaza Hotel, the better our chances of survival." The newly expanded group quickly gathered their supplies and set out, navigating the treacherous streets towards their next objective. As they made their way, Sarah couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. With more allies by their side, perhaps they stood a better chance of weathering the storm. The journey was not without its challenges, however. The infected appeared to be drawn to the sound of their movement, forcing the group to take detours and use stealth to avoid detection. Danny's knowledge of the underground tunnels proved invaluable, allowing them to bypass the hordes of undead that roamed the surface. As they traversed the dark, damp passages, Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The confined spaces and the oppressive atmosphere only heightened the sense of danger that permeated their every step. "How much farther?" Chris whispered, his voice barely audible. "Not far now," Danny replied, his own voice hushed. "The tunnel should open up right near the hotel's loading dock." Sarah gripped her weapon tighter, her heart pounding in her chest. The thought of facing the unknown, of confronting whatever dangers might lie ahead, was enough to make her stomach churn with anxiety. "Hey," a gentle voice said, and she turned to see Maria walking beside her. "We're going to get through this, okay? We've got each other's backs." Sarah nodded, offering the other woman a small, grateful smile. I know. I just can't shake the feeling that something bad is waiting for us. Maria squeezed her arm reassuringly. Whatever it is, we'll face it together. We've come this far, and we're not going to let this city beat us. The group pressed on, their footsteps echoing in the darkness. As they neared the end of the tunnel, Sarah could feel the tension building, the anticipation of what lay ahead palpable in the air. Suddenly, the passage opened up, and the towering silhouette of the Plaza Hotel came into view. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she surveyed the grand, once opulent structure. Now it seemed to loom over them, a testament to the devastation that had consumed the city. There it is, Danny whispered, his voice tinged with a mix of awe and trepidation. The Plaza Hotel. Sarah steeled herself, her resolve hardening. All right, let's do this. We're not going to take this place without a fight, but if we work together, I think we can make it our own. The group exchanged determined glances, and as one, they began to make their way towards the hotel's entrance, their footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. As they approached the main doors, Sarah held up a hand, signaling the others to stop. Wait, we need to be careful. Who knows what's waiting for us inside? Chris nodded, his brow furrowed in concentration. Agreed. Danny, is there another way in? Something a little more discreet? Danny thought for a moment, then nodded. Yeah, follow me. There's a loading dock around the side that should give us some cover. The group followed Danny, their senses on high alert as they navigated the perimeter of the hotel. The closer they got, the more Sarah could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on them. This was their chance to secure a stronghold, a place to call home in the midst of the chaos. But the risk was high, and the stakes were even higher. As they reached the loading dock, Danny paused, his expression wary. All right, this is it. The door should be unlocked, but we need to be quiet. I don't know what's waiting for us on the other side. Sarah nodded, gripping her weapon tightly. Okay, let's do this. Stick close and keep your eyes peeled. One by one, the group slipped through the door, their footsteps muffled as they entered the cavernous space of the hotel's underbelly. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and the sound of distant moans sent a chill down Sarah's spine. They moved cautiously, their eyes scanning the shadows for any signs of danger. As they navigated the dimly lit corridors, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that the very walls of the hotel were alive with unseen threats. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the hallway, and the group froze, their weapons raised and ready. What was that? Maria whispered, her voice trembling. Before anyone could respond, a horde of infected burst through a nearby doorway, their snarls and growls echoing through the confined space. The group opened fire, the deafening sound of gunshots ricocheting off the walls as they fought to hold their ground. Sarah ducked behind an overturned crate, her heart pounding in her chest. She could see Chris and Danny engaging the infected, their movements strategic and precise. Max was laying down cover fire, his face a mask of intense concentration. Maria, however, was nowhere to be seen. Sarah scanned the area, her panic rising, until she spotted the nurse crouched beside an injured survivor, tending to their wounds with a practiced hand. Gritting her teeth, Sarah steeled her nerves and rejoined the fray, her weapon blazing as she fought to protect her newfound allies. The infected seemed relentless, their numbers seemingly endless as they surged forward, their bloodied jaws snapping in the dim light. But the group refused to be cowed, their teamwork and determination proving to be a formidable force. Slowly but surely, they began to push the infected back, their combined efforts gradually turning the tide of the battle. As the last of the undead fell, the group took a moment to catch their breath, their chests heaving with exertion. "Everyone all right?" Sarah asked, her gaze sweeping over the battered but alive group. Chris nodded, his expression grim. "We're all still standing, but that was one hell of a welcome wagon." Danny wiped the sweat from his brow, his eyes narrowed with concern. "This is just the beginning. If the Plaza Hotel is as fortified as I remember, there's bound to be more where that came from." Sarah felt a wave of trepidation wash over her, but she forced herself to remain composed. "Then we'd better get to work. The sooner we can secure this place, the better our chances of survival." The group exchanged determined glances, their resolve hardening in the face of the daunting challenge that lay ahead. With a deep breath, they pressed onward, determined to make the Plaza Hotel their stronghold in the midst of the apocalyptic chaos that had consumed their city. As they navigated the winding corridors, Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at the sheer scale and grandeur of the hotel. Despite the decay and the ever-present threat of the infected, the building still exuded a sense of elegance and opulence that was a stark contrast to the grim realities of their new reality. "This place is massive," Max murmured, his gaze sweeping over the ornate lobby. "If we can secure it, we'd have more than enough space to set up a proper base of operations." Chris nodded, his expression thoughtful. "That's exactly what I was thinking. With the right defenses and the right people, this could be the key to our survival." Sarah felt a surge of hope at the prospect, but she knew they couldn't afford to let their guard down. "We still have a lot of work ahead of us. This place is crawling with infected, and who knows what other threats might be lurking inside." Maria stepped forward, her eyes filled with a steely determination. "Then we'd better get started. The sooner we can clear the hotel, the sooner we can start making it our own." The group nodded in agreement, and with renewed vigor, they set out to explore the vast, labyrinthine structure, their footsteps echoing in the eerie silence as they searched for a way to claim the Plaza Hotel as their own. As they navigated the winding corridors, Sarah couldn't shake the sense that they were being watched, that the very walls of the hotel were alive with unseen dangers. The constant threat of the infected, coupled with the uncertainty of what else might be lurking in the shadows, made every step a precarious one. But Sarah refused to be cowed. She had come too far, fought too hard to let this place defeat her. With her newfound allies by her side, she was determined to secure the Plaza Hotel and transform it into a stronghold, a beacon of hope in the midst of the apocalyptic chaos. As they delved deeper into the hotel, the group encountered more and more signs of the rival gang's presence. Barricaded doors, makeshift defenses, and the occasional skirmish with the infected that had been driven back by the gang's own efforts. "They're definitely here," Chris murmured, his brow furrowed with concentration. "And they're not going to give up this place without a fight." Sarah nodded, her mind racing as she tried to formulate a plan. "Then we'll have to be smarter, stronger, and more determined than they are. We've come too far to let them take this from us." The group pressed on, their footsteps muffled by the thick carpet as they navigated the once opulent halls. Sarah could feel the weight of the task before them, the sheer scale of the challenge they were facing, but she refused to let it deter her. As they approached the hotel's central atrium, a sudden movement in the shadows caught Sarah's eye. She raised her weapon, her finger poised on the trigger as a figure emerged from the darkness. "Well, well, look what we have here," a gruff voice said, and Sarah's breath caught in her throat as a man stepped forward, a twisted grin on his face. "Seems we have some new guests in our humble abode." Sarah's grip on her weapon tightened, her heart pounding in her chest. "This place doesn't belong to you. We're here to take it back." The man let out a harsh laugh, his eyes gleaming with malice. "Oh, I don't think so, sweetheart. This hotel is ours, and we're not about to let a bunch of scavengers like you waltz in and take it from us." Chris stepped forward, his expression grim. "We don't want any trouble, but we're not leaving either. This place is our best chance at survival, and we're not going to let you take that away from us." The man's gaze narrowed, and he raised his hand, signaling to his unseen followers. "Then it looks like we've got ourselves a fight." Suddenly the atrium erupted with the sounds of gunfire and the snarls of the infected, as the rival gang launched their attack. Sarah and her companions dove for cover, their weapons blazing as they fought to hold their ground. In the chaos, Sarah caught a glimpse of Maria and Danny huddled behind an overturned table, their faces etched with fear and determination. Max was positioned near the balcony, his fingers flying across a laptop as he attempted to gain control of the hotel's security systems. And in the midst of it all, Sarah could see Chris, his face a mask of fierce concentration as he fought to protect the group. She knew that in this moment, their survival depended on their ability to work together, to overcome the obstacles that stood in their way. With a deep breath, Sarah joined the fray, her weapon blazing. Chapter 2. Unlikely Allies. Sarah Morgan's lungs burned as she raced through the chaotic streets of New York City. The panic-stricken crowds around her only added to the confusion, as people fled in every direction, some driven to madness by the horrifying scenes unfolding before their eyes. Bellevue Hospital, where Sarah had just finished her shift, had descended into utter chaos. A patient had suddenly turned violent, attacking a nurse with inhuman ferocity before others quickly succumbed to the same strange ailment. Sarah had narrowly escaped the carnage, fearing that the entire city had been overrun by some kind of epidemic. As she ran, dodging abandoned vehicles and the occasional infected person lurching towards her, Sarah desperately searched for a safe haven. Her mind raced, trying to piece together what was happening and where she could find shelter. The streets had become a battleground, and Sarah knew she couldn't survive on her own for long. Turning a corner, Sarah found herself in the shadow of the towering Empire State Building. The iconic landmark was a beacon of familiarity in the midst of the unfolding nightmare. Gasping for breath, she scanned the area, hoping to find any sign of life or a place to hide. Suddenly, a firm hand gripped her arm, startling her. "This way," a gruff voice commanded, and Sarah barely had time to react before she was being pulled along by a tall, muscular man in fatigues. "Who are you?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and relief. "Chris," the man replied, his gaze focused on navigating the chaotic streets. "I saw you running, and you looked like you could use some help." Sarah nodded, sensing the authority and confidence in his tone. "Thank you," she said, quickening her pace to keep up with his long strides. Chris led her into a narrow alleyway, away from the maddening crowds. Once they were out of the immediate danger, he turned to face her, his eyes assessing her condition. "Are you injured?" he asked, his voice softening slightly. Sarah shook her head. "No, I'm fine. Just shaken. What's happening out there?" Chris's brow furrowed. "I'm not sure, but it doesn't look good. Whatever's going on, it's spreading fast. We need to find a safe place to regroup and figure out our next move." Sarah nodded, her mind racing with the implications of his words. "Do you have a plan?" Chris paused, considering his options. "I've got a few ideas, but I can't do this alone. I could use your help." Sarah hesitated for a moment, her natural instinct to help others warring with the overwhelming sense of fear and uncertainty. But one look at Chris's unwavering gaze told her that she could trust him, at least for now. "Okay," she said, squaring her shoulders. "What do you need me to do?" Chris allowed himself a small nod of approval. "First, we need to find somewhere secure to hole up, somewhere we can gather supplies and plan our next move. There's got to be a building or a store nearby that we can fortify." "The library," Sarah blurted out. "The New York Public Library. It's close and it has multiple access points. We could use that to our advantage." Chris considered the suggestion, his mind already formulating a strategy. "Good thinking. Let's go take a look." The pair set off, moving quickly and cautiously through the increasingly deserted streets. Abandoned vehicles and the occasional infected person were the only obstacles they encountered, and Chris's military training proved invaluable as he guided them, avoiding confrontation whenever possible. As they approached the iconic library, Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of familiarity and hope. This was a place she had visited countless times, a sanctuary of knowledge and learning. Now, it could become a sanctuary of a different kind. Chris gestured for Sarah to follow him as he circled the building, searching for the best entry point. "There," he said, pointing to a side entrance. "That looks like our best way in." Together, they cautiously pushed the door open, weapons at the ready. The interior of the library was eerily silent, save for the sound of their footsteps echoing through the cavernous halls. "Stay close and keep your eyes peeled," Chris whispered, his grip tightening on the makeshift weapon he had fashioned from a metal pipe. Sarah nodded, her own hands gripping a heavy book, ready to use it as a bludgeon if necessary. They moved through the stacks, their senses heightened, searching for any signs of life or danger. As they reached the main lobby, a sudden movement caught their eye. Sarah tensed, ready to strike, but Chris held up a hand to stop her. "Wait," he said, squinting into the gloom. A figure emerged from the shadows, hands raised in a gesture of surrender. "Don't shoot!" a voice called out. Chris and Sarah exchanged a wary glance, but they lowered their weapons slightly, allowing the stranger to approach. "Who are you?" Chris demanded, his tone still guarded. The man stepped into the light, revealing himself to be a young, lanky individual with a shock of unruly brown hair. "My name is Max. I was just trying to find a safe place to hole up." Sarah felt a flicker of recognition. "Max? From the tech startup on Lexington?" Max's eyes widened in surprise. "Sarah? Wow, I never thought I'd see a familiar face around here." Chris looked between the two, his expression skeptical. "You know each other?" Sarah nodded. "Sort of. Max and I were casual acquaintances, but I never thought I'd run into him in a situation like this." Max offered a sheepish smile. "Yeah, well, I guess the end of the world has a way of bringing people together, huh?" Chris regarded the young man with a critical eye. "And what makes you think you can be of use to us?" Max straightened his shoulders, a spark of determination in his eyes. "I'm a tech genius, for one, and I've been preparing for something like this for years. I've got supplies, equipment, and a plan to get us through this." Sarah could sense the underlying confidence in Max's voice, and she found herself intrigued. "What kind of plan?" she asked. Max glanced around nervously, as if expecting the infected to burst through the doors at any moment. "Look, I know this all sounds crazy, but I think I can help us survive. And the library, it's the perfect place to set up a fortress." Chris studied Max for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he nodded. "All right, kid, show us what you've got." Max's face lit up with relief and excitement. "Follow me. I've got a lot to show you." As the trio made their way deeper into the library, Sarah couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope amidst the overwhelming sense of dread. With Chris's tactical expertise and Max's technical skills, perhaps they stood a chance of finding a way to endure this apocalyptic nightmare. The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity, as Max revealed the extent of his preparations. He had stockpiled a vast array of supplies, from canned food and water to medical equipment and weapons. Perhaps most impressively, he had set up a makeshift command center in one of the library's study rooms, complete with surveillance cameras, backup generators, and a network of communication devices. "This is impressive," Chris acknowledged as he surveyed the setup. "How did you manage all of this?" Max shrugged, a hint of pride in his voice. "When you've been planning for the end of the world for as long as I have, you tend to accumulate a few things." He paused, his expression turning serious. "Look, I know this is a lot to take in, but I really think we can make this work. We can turn the library into a fortified safe haven, a place where we can wait out this crisis and maybe even figure out a way to fight back." Sarah felt a surge of hope at Max's words. "You really believe we can do this?" Max nodded emphatically. "Absolutely. With the three of us working together, I know we can survive this. Hell, we might even be able to help others along the way." Chris remained silent for a moment, his brow furrowed in thought. "All right, let's do it," he said finally. "But we play by my rules. This is a military operation, and I'm in charge." Max opened his mouth to protest, but Sarah cut him off with a reassuring smile. "That sounds fair. We need your leadership, Chris. And we need each other if we're going to make it through this." The trio shook on their newfound alliance, their determination solidifying in the face of the looming threat. As they began the arduous task of fortifying the library, Sarah couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. With these two unlikely allies by her side, perhaps they could find a way to not just survive, but to fight back and reclaim their city. The days that followed were filled with a flurry of activity as the trio worked tirelessly to secure the library. They set up barricades at the entrances, rigged alarm systems, and stockpiled supplies. Max's technical expertise proved invaluable, as he hacked into the building's security systems and set up a network of surveillance cameras to monitor the surrounding area. Meanwhile, Chris's military training came in handy as he drilled the group in defensive tactics and weapons handling. Sarah, with her medical background, took charge of organizing the medical supplies and establishing a makeshift infirmary. As they settled into their newfound safe haven, Sarah couldn't help but marvel at the unlikely partnership that had formed between the three of them. Chris, the gruff and disciplined former Marine, Max, the brilliant but socially awkward survivalist, and herself, the compassionate paramedic. It's kind of crazy that we're all here, working together like this, she mused one evening as they gathered around a makeshift campfire in the library's main lobby. Chris grunted in agreement. Yeah, well, desperate times call for desperate measures, and right now, we need all the help we can get. Max nodded, his eyes reflecting the flickering flames. I never thought I'd be in the middle of a real-life apocalypse scenario, but I'm glad I have you guys watching my back. Sarah reached out and squeezed Max's shoulder, offering him a reassuring smile. We're in this together, Max, all of us. The trio fell silent, each lost in their own thoughts as they contemplated the challenges that lay ahead. The city outside had descended into chaos, and they knew that their newfound stronghold was only a temporary respite. But as Sarah gazed around at her unlikely companions, she felt a sense of determination and hope taking root within her. They may have been thrown together by circumstance, but she knew that they were stronger together. And with their combined skills and resources, perhaps they could find a way to not just survive, but to fight back and reclaim their world. The sound of the library's alarms suddenly pierced the stillness, shattering the moment of reflection. Chris was on his feet in an instant, his eyes scanning the room for the source of the disturbance. We've got company, he growled, his grip tightening on his weapon. Sarah and Max jumped up, adrenaline surging as they prepared to defend their newfound sanctuary. Whatever lay beyond those doors, they were ready to face it head-on, united in their determination to endure. Chapter 3. The Tech Genius. Sarah and Chris made their way through the eerily quiet streets of Manhattan, their footsteps echoing against the towering skyscrapers. The air was thick with the stench of panic and fear as they navigated the abandoned vehicles and debris littering the sidewalks. We need to find more survivors, Sarah said, her eyes scanning the area for any signs of life. There's strength in numbers if we're going to make it through this. Chris nodded, his military training kicking in as he took point, his gaze constantly sweeping the surroundings for threats. There's got to be others out there who managed to escape the initial outbreak. We just have to find them. As they crossed 42nd Street, the familiar silhouette of the Empire State Building loomed in the distance, its lights flickering ominously. Suddenly, a commotion caught their attention from an alleyway to their left. "Get down!" Chris hissed, pulling Sarah behind the cover of an overturned car. They peered cautiously around the edge, watching as a group of the virus-infected stumbled out of the alley, their grotesque features twisted in a feral hunger. Sarah gripped her backpack, her eyes darting around for a possible escape route. "We can't stay here. We need to keep moving." Chris placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Stay close to me. I'll keep you safe." Carefully, they crept away from the alley, their senses on high alert as they made their way towards Grand Central Terminal. The once bustling transportation hub was eerily quiet, save for the occasional moan of the infected. "There has to be someone else out there," Sarah said, her voice laced with desperation. "We can't be the only ones left." As if in answer to her plea, a sudden movement caught their eye near the main entrance. A young man, his backpack bulging with supplies, was frantically waving them over. "Hey, over here!" he called out, his voice tinged with a mix of relief and caution. Sarah and Chris exchanged a quick glance before cautiously approaching the stranger. The man's eyes darted between them, sizing them up. "I'm Max," he said, his tone guarded. "You two look like you could use some help." "We're just trying to survive this mess," Chris replied, his fingers tightening around the handle of his knife. "You got a plan?" Max nodded, a hint of a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "As a matter of fact, I do. Follow me." Without another word, the young man turned and headed deeper into the terminal, navigating the maze of abandoned luggage and debris with practiced ease. Sarah and Chris had little choice but to follow, their wary gazes scanning the area for any sign of danger. As they climbed the stairs towards the upper levels, Max led them to a seemingly nondescript door, its lock broken and hanging open. "In here," he said, ushering them inside. The room was dimly lit, but Sarah could make out the outlines of various electronic equipment and supplies stacked neatly against the walls. Max closed the door behind them, securing it as best he could. "Welcome to my hideout," he proclaimed, a touch of pride in his voice. "This is where I've been holed up since the outbreak started." Sarah and Chris looked around, their eyes widening with a mixture of surprise and cautious optimism. "How the hell did you manage to set this place up?" Chris asked, his tone laced with a hint of admiration. Max grinned, his fingers already tapping away at one of the computer monitors. "I've been preparing for something like this for years. Call me a paranoid survivalist, but I had a feeling the world was going to go to hell sooner or later." Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over her. "So you have supplies, equipment, a secure location. This could be exactly what we need to increase our chances of survival." Max nodded, his expression turning serious. "I've got food, water, medical supplies, and a cache of weapons and gear, but I can't hold out here forever. We need to figure out a way to secure a more permanent stronghold if we're going to make it through this." Chris crossed his arms over his chest, his brow furrowed in thought. "Any ideas on where we could go? Somewhere with enough resources and defensibility to hold out against those things?" Max's eyes gleamed with a newfound determination. "As a matter of fact, I do, but it's going to take some planning and a lot of grit to pull it off." He stepped closer to the pair, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial tone. "How do you feel about taking control of the Plaza Hotel?" Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. "The Plaza Hotel? Isn't that place supposed to be one of the most secure and well-stocked buildings in the city?" Max nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly, and right now, it's in the hands of a rival gang that's been terrorizing the area. If we can take it back, we'd have a fortress to call our own." Chris leaned in, his interest piqued. "What kind of defenses are we talking about? And how do you propose we take on an entire gang?" Max grinned, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "I've been keeping an eye on the plaza for a while now. The gang's got a decent setup, but their security system is outdated. If we time it right and hit them hard, we might just be able to take them down." He paused, his expression turning more somber. "It won't be easy, though. These guys are ruthless, and they've got the numbers and the firepower to make it a real challenge." Sarah felt a surge of trepidation, but she couldn't ignore the allure of the Plaza Hotel as a potential safe haven. "If we pull this off, we'd have access to food, water, medical supplies, and a secure place to hold out. It could be our best chance at surviving this nightmare." Chris nodded, his military training kicking in. "All right, let's hear your plan. We're going to need every advantage we can get if we're going to take on this rival gang." Max's eyes gleamed with excitement as he launched into a detailed explanation of his strategy, his fingers flying across the keyboard to pull up schematics and surveillance footage of the Plaza Hotel. Sarah and Chris listened intently, their own ideas and suggestions contributing to the evolving plan. As they pored over the intel, Sarah couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. With Max's technical expertise, Chris's tactical skills, and her own medical knowledge, they just might have a chance at securing a stronghold in the midst of the chaos. It was a risk, but one they couldn't afford to ignore. "All right, let's do this," Chris said, his voice laced with determination. "The Plaza Hotel is our best shot at survival. We'll need to move fast and hit them hard. You two ready for this?" Sarah took a deep breath, her fingers tightening around the strap of her backpack. "As ready as we'll ever be. Let's go take back our city." The trio set to work, finalizing the details of their plan and gathering the necessary supplies and weapons. Time was of the essence, and they knew that their window of opportunity might be narrow. But with their combined skills and determination, they were determined to seize their chance at creating a safe haven in the midst of the apocalyptic chaos. As they prepared to venture out into the virus-ravaged streets, Sarah couldn't help but feel a surge of adrenaline coursing through her veins. This was their moment to fight back, to reclaim a semblance of control in a world that had seemingly fallen apart. With her newfound allies by her side, she felt a renewed sense of purpose, a glimmer of hope that they just might make it through this nightmare after all. Chapter 4: The Delhi Fortress. The trio made their way through the abandoned streets, their footsteps echoing against the towering buildings. The air was thick with the stench of decay and the occasional moans of the infected, a constant reminder of the threat that lurked around every corner. Sarah gripped the strap of her backpack, her eyes darting from one shadowy corner to the next. "Are you sure this is the best way to get to the Plaza Hotel?" she asked, her voice laced with apprehension. Max nodded, his gaze fixed ahead. It's the most direct route, and it should be relatively clear of the infected. We just need to move quickly and stay alert. Chris took the lead, his weapon at the ready, his military training guiding his every step. "Stay close and keep quiet," he murmured, his eyes scanning the area for any signs of danger. As they navigated the debris-strewn streets, Sarah couldn't help but marvel at the eerie silence that had descended upon the city. The once bustling metropolis was now a ghost town, its residents either dead or hiding in fear. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from a nearby alleyway, followed by the unmistakable sound of a snarling, inhuman creature. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as Chris raised his weapon, his finger poised on the trigger. "Get ready," he whispered, his eyes narrowing as he peered into the darkness. A horde of the virus-infected stumbled into view, their grotesque features contorted in a feral hunger. Chris opened fire, his shots ringing out with precision and purpose. Sarah and Max took cover behind an overturned car, their own weapons at the ready. They waited with bated breath as Chris methodically picked off the infected, his movements fluid and efficient. When the last of the creatures had fallen, Chris rejoined them, his face etched with a grim determination. "We need to keep moving. That gunfire is sure to attract more of them." The trio pressed on, their pace quickening as they navigated the treacherous streets. Sarah could feel the adrenaline coursing through her veins, her senses heightened as she scanned the area for any signs of danger. Finally, they reached their destination, the iconic Cat's Delicatessen, its neon sign flickering ominously in the twilight. Max gestured towards the entrance, a hint of a smile on his face. "This is it," he said, his voice hushed. "Our first stronghold." Chris took the lead, his weapon at the ready as he pushed open the door, the familiar scent of cured meats and baked bread wafting out to greet them. Sarah and Max followed close behind, their eyes wide with a mixture of apprehension and anticipation. The deli was in a state of disarray, with overturned tables and scattered debris littering the floor. Sarah's gaze swept the area, searching for any signs of life. "Looks like the place has already been ransacked," Chris murmured, his brow furrowed in concentration. Max nodded, his mind already whirring with possibilities. "That just means we have some work to do to secure it. But with the right supplies and a little elbow grease, this could be the perfect fortress." Sarah felt a surge of hope, her mind already racing with plans to transform the deli into a safe haven. "Let's get to work, then. The sooner we can get this place fortified, the better our chances of survival." The trio set to work, their movements quick and efficient as they began to clear the deli of debris and set up barricades at the entrances. Sarah focused on inventorying the remaining supplies, her medical expertise coming in handy as she assessed the state of the first aid kits and medications. Max, meanwhile, had already started tinkering with the security system, his nimble fingers flying across the controls as he rerouted the power and set up a network of cameras and motion sensors. Chris, ever the tactical leader, took charge of organizing their defenses, barricading the doors and windows, and setting up strategic vantage points for snipers. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the trio stepped back to admire their work, their faces etched with a sense of accomplishment. "Not bad for a day's work," Chris said, a hint of pride in his voice. Sarah nodded, a smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "We did it. We actually managed to secure a safe haven in the middle of this chaos." Max grinned, his eyes alight with a newfound determination. "This is just the beginning. Once we get some more supplies and people, we can start turning this place into a real fortress." The trio settled in for the night, their senses on high alert as they kept watch for any signs of the infected or other threats. Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of cautious optimism, her mind already buzzing with ideas for how they could transform the deli into a thriving community. As she drifted off to sleep, her thoughts turned to the challenges that lay ahead, the battles they would have to fight, the sacrifices they might have to make. But for now, she took solace in the knowledge that they had found a safe haven, a place to call home in the midst of the apocalyptic chaos. Chapter 5. Knowledge is Power. In the days that followed, the trio at Katz's Delicatessen worked tirelessly to fortify their newfound stronghold. Under Chris's guidance, they reinforced the doors and windows, installed robust barricades, and set up a system of tripwires and alarms to warn them of any approaching threats. Max, with his keen intellect and technical expertise, transformed the deli's security system into a formidable defense network. He rigged up a series of motion-activated cameras and sensors, allowing them to monitor the surrounding area from the relative safety of their sanctuary. Meanwhile, Sarah focused her efforts on cataloging and organizing their medical supplies, ensuring that they were well equipped to handle any injuries or illnesses that might arise. She also made a careful study of the available reference materials, searching for any information that might shed light on the nature of the virus that had devastated the city. As the days turned into weeks, the trio settled into a routine, their roles and responsibilities becoming increasingly defined. Chris took charge of their security and defense, Sarah tended to the group's medical needs, and Max continued to refine their technological capabilities. One morning, as Sarah was performing a routine inventory check, she stumbled upon a collection of medical textbooks and research papers tucked away in a hidden compartment behind the deli's counter. "Max, Chris, come take a look at this," she called out, her voice laced with excitement. The two men hurried to her side, their eyes widening with interest as they examined the cache of materials. "These could be exactly what we need to start understanding this virus," Sarah said, her fingers tracing the worn spines of the textbooks. "With this information, we might be able to develop some kind of treatment or even a cure." Chris nodded, his brow furrowed in concentration. "If we can figure out how this virus works, we might be able to find a way to stop it from spreading. That could be a game changer for our survival." Max was already in motion, clearing a workspace and setting up a makeshift laboratory. "Let's get started." Chapter 4: The Delhi Fortress. The streets of New York City had descended into chaos. Panicked crowds fled in all directions, desperate to escape the ravenous horde of infected individuals. Among the chaos, Sarah Morgan and Chris hurried down the crumbling sidewalk, their eyes scanning the surroundings for any sign of safety. "We need to find a secure location, somewhere we can fortify and defend," Chris said, his military training kicking in. "This city is only going to get worse." Sarah nodded, her mind racing as they navigated the treacherous streets. "There has to be some place we can hold up, some place with supplies and a defensible position." As they rounded the corner, the iconic sign of Katz's Delicatessen came into view, a beacon of hope in the midst of the apocalyptic scene. Sarah's eyes lit up with a spark of determination. "That's it," she said, picking up her pace. "That deli has to be our first safe haven." Chris followed closely, his hands gripping his makeshift weapon tightly. "Let's hope it's as defensible as it looks." The duo approached the deli, their footsteps quickening as they saw the building's sturdy construction and the relative absence of infected in the immediate area. Sarah took a deep breath, steeling herself for the confrontation to come. "All right, let's do this," she said, her voice laced with a newfound confidence. "We'll secure the deli and use it as our base of operations. With any luck, we might even find other survivors who can join us." Chris nodded, his gaze hardening as he scanned the surrounding streets. "I'll take point. Stay close and watch my back." The two of them surged forward, bursting through the deli's entrance and quickly securing the perimeter. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as they encountered a handful of infected customers, their movements sluggish and their eyes vacant. Chris dispatched them with a few well-placed blows, his combat training proving invaluable. As the last of the infected fell, Sarah and Chris paused to catch their breath, their eyes scanning the dimly lit deli. "Looks clear," Chris said, his voice low and steady. "Now we need to secure the exits and get a feel for the layout." Sarah nodded, her mind already whirring with plans and strategies. "I'll start barricading the windows and doors. You can check the storerooms and see what supplies we can salvage." The duo set to work, their movements efficient and coordinated. Sarah dragged heavy tables and chairs in front of the deli's windows, creating a fortified barrier against the infected. Chris, meanwhile, explored the kitchen and storage areas, gathering canned goods, medical supplies, and any other useful items he could find. As they worked, an odd sense of calm settled over the deli, a stark contrast to the chaos that reigned outside. Sarah couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope, a tiny spark that ignited within her despite the overwhelming darkness that had consumed the city. "We're actually doing it," she murmured to herself, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "We're making this work." After several hours of tireless effort, the deli had been transformed into a secure and well-stocked stronghold. Sarah and Chris stood back, surveying their handiwork with a sense of cautious pride. "Not bad," Chris said, a hint of approval in his voice. "We might just have a fighting chance here." Sarah nodded, her gaze sweeping over the fortified entryways and the stocked pantry. "Now we just need to figure out our next move. We can't stay here forever, not with the city in this state." Chris crossed his arms, his brow furrowing in thought. "We should start looking for other survivors, see if we can find people willing to join our little community." Sarah's eyes widened at the suggestion, her heart quickening with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. "You think others will even be willing to trust us?" "It's worth a shot," Chris replied, his voice steady and assured. "The more of us there are, the better our chances of survival. And if we can build a strong enough group, maybe we can even start to reclaim the city." The idea was both daunting and intoxicating, and Sarah found herself drawn to the possibility of not just surviving, but actively fighting back against the darkness that had consumed their world. She took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. "All right, let's do it," she said, her voice filled with newfound determination. "We'll put the word out, see who else is out there and willing to join our cause." Chris offered her a rare, reassuring smile. "That's the spirit. Now let's get some rest. We've got a lot of work ahead of us." The two of them retreated to the deli's back room, where they had set up a makeshift sleeping area. As Sarah lay down, her weary body finally relaxing, she couldn't help but feel a sense of cautious optimism. They had secured a safe haven, and now they had the opportunity to build something more, a community, a bastion of hope in the midst of the darkness. With that thought in mind, Sarah allowed her eyes to drift shut, her mind already racing with plans and strategies for the days to come. Whatever the future held, she knew that they were no longer alone in this fight for survival. In the quiet of the deli, the subtle sounds of movement outside served as a constant reminder of the perilous world that awaited them. But for now, Sarah and Chris had found a temporary respite, a chance to regroup and prepare for the challenges that would inevitably come their way. As the night wore on, the two of them remained vigilant, their senses attuned to the slightest disturbance. They knew that the battle for their survival was far from over, but in that moment, they felt a glimmer of hope, a spark that had the potential to grow into a raging fire, one that could light the way through the endless darkness. Chapter 5. Knowledge is Power. The group's footsteps echoed through the deserted streets as they made their way towards the New York Public Library. Sarah gripped her makeshift weapon tightly, her eyes scanning the area for any signs of the infected. The city had become a maze of abandoned vehicles and debris, making the journey more treacherous than they had anticipated. "We need to move quickly and quietly," Chris whispered, his military training kicking in. "The library should provide us with more resources and a defensible position." Max nodded, his mind already whirring with plans to fortify the building. "If we can secure the library, we'll have access to valuable information and potentially even medical resources to help understand this outbreak." Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose. The library represented more than just a safe haven. It was a chance to gain the knowledge they needed to survive, and perhaps even find a way to fight back against the virus. As they approached the grand limestone building, Sarah could see the damage that had already been inflicted. The main entrance was partially blocked, and she could hear the eerie moans of the infected drifting from within. "All right, let's do this," Chris said, his grip tightening on his weapon. "Max, you and I will take point. Sarah, stay close and be ready to provide medical aid if needed." The trio cautiously made their way through the rubble, Sarah's heart pounding in her chest. She could see the infected shambling in the distance, their movements erratic and predatory. With a nod from Chris, Max and Chris launched their attack, their weapons trained on the undead. Sarah watched as they moved with practiced precision, taking down each threat with swift, decisive strikes. Once the immediate danger had passed, The group pressed on, clearing their path into the library. The grand halls that had once been bustling with scholars and students now lay abandoned, the eerie silence punctuated only by the distant sounds of the infected. "Spread out and search for any survivors," Chris ordered. "We need to secure this place as quickly as possible." Sarah and the others fanned out, their footsteps echoing through the cavernous building. She made her way towards the medical section, her fingers tracing the spines of the books as she searched for anything that could shed light on the virus. "Hey, I think I found something," Max's voice called out, breaking the silence. "There's a cache of supplies in the basement, including some medical equipment." Sarah hurried to his location, her heart racing with hope. As she descended the stairs, she could see that Max had indeed uncovered a hidden stash of resources, bandages, antiseptic, and even a small generator. "This is incredible," Sarah breathed, her mind already running through the various ways they could use these supplies. "With these, we might be able to better treat any injuries and even start researching the virus." Chris joined them, his expression grim. "I found a few bodies in the main reading room. Looks like they didn't make it." Sarah's heart sank, but she steeled her resolve. "Then we need to make sure their sacrifice wasn't in vain. Let's get this place secured and start figuring out how to fight back." Over the next few hours, the trio worked tirelessly, barricading the entrances and setting up a makeshift command center in the library's main hall. Max tapped into the building's security systems, using his technical expertise to establish a surveillance network that would help them monitor the surrounding area. As they rested, Sarah pored over the medical texts, her brow furrowed in concentration. The virus seems to target the brain, causing the infected to become aggressive and, well, zombie-like. But the good news is that the infected don't appear to be as strong or fast as we initially thought. Chris nodded, his expression thoughtful. "That could give us an advantage in a fight. If we can find a way to neutralize the virus, we might be able to turn the tide." "Exactly," Sarah replied, her eyes gleaming with determination. "And with the resources we've found here, I think we have a chance to do just that." As the day drew to a close, the group gathered around a makeshift table, sharing their findings and discussing their next steps. Sarah felt a sense of cautious optimism, knowing that they were one step closer to understanding the virus and, perhaps, finding a way to reclaim their city. "We should start sending out scouting parties to search for other survivors," Chris suggested. "The more people we can gather, the better our chances of survival." Max nodded in agreement. "And we'll need to fortify this place even further. I can jury-rig some security systems to help keep the infected at bay." Sarah listened intently, her mind racing with possibilities. "In the meantime, I'll continue my research and see if I can find any clues about the virus's weaknesses. Maybe there's a way we can develop some kind of treatment or even a cure." The group fell silent, the weight of their task weighing heavily on them. But in the midst of the darkness, Sarah could see a glimmer of hope. They were no longer alone in their fight for survival, and with their combined skills and determination, they might just have a chance to turn the tide. As night fell, Sarah found herself standing at one of the library's large windows, gazing out at the abandoned city. The familiar landmarks she had once taken for granted now stood as eerie reminders of the world they had lost. But in the distance, she could see a faint light, a beacon of hope in the seemingly endless darkness. With a deep breath, Sarah turned and rejoined her companions, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. They were in this fight together, and she was determined to see it through to the end. Chapter 6: Unexpected Allies. While scavenging for medical supplies in a ransacked pharmacy on Broadway, the group encountered an unexpected pair of survivors: Maria, an experienced nurse, and her younger brother, Danny. Sarah, Chris, and Max had been scouring the area, their weapons at the ready as they navigated the eerie silence of the deserted streets. The constant threat of the virus infected had kept them on high alert, their senses constantly scanning for any signs of movement or danger. As they approached the pharmacy, a muffled scream caught their attention. Without hesitation, they rushed inside, guns drawn, only to find Maria cornered by a group of the infected. Danny stood protectively in front of her, his face etched with determination, but the sheer number of the undead threatened to overwhelm them. Sarah wasted no time, her paramedic training kicking in as she sprung into action. Chris and Max provided cover fire, taking down the creatures one by one, while Sarah rushed to Maria's side, quickly assessing her condition. "Are you hurt?" Sarah asked, her eyes filled with concern. Maria shook her head, her expression a mix of relief and fear. "No, but we can't hold them off much longer. There are too many." Chris and Max continued their relentless assault, their weapons firing in a steady rhythm. The sound of the gunshots echoed through the abandoned streets, drawing more of the infected towards their position. Realizing they needed to retreat, Sarah turned to the newcomers. "We have a secure location just a few blocks from here. Can you make it?" Maria hesitated for a moment, glancing at Danny, who gave a resolute nod. "Yes, we can. Lead the way." Without another word, the group fought their way through the horde, Sarah and Maria providing medical assistance to the injured, while Chris and Max covered their retreat. Danny's knowledge of the city's underground tunnels proved invaluable, allowing them to navigate the treacherous streets and reach the relative safety of the New York Public Library. Once inside, the group took a moment to catch their breath, their adrenaline still coursing through their veins. Sarah quickly introduced the new arrivals to Max and Chris, explaining the circumstances of their encounter. "We're grateful for your help," Maria said, her voice tinged with relief. "I'm Maria, and this is my brother Danny." Danny offered a slight nod, his eyes scanning the library's interior with a keen interest. "This place is well fortified. You've done a good job securing it." Max, ever the pragmatic one, stepped forward. "We've been using it as a base of operations, but resources are scarce, and we're constantly on the lookout for supplies and other survivors. What brings you two out here?" Maria's expression darkened as she recounted their harrowing journey. "We were at Bellevue when the outbreak started. Danny and I barely made it out alive. We've been trying to survive on our own, but it's been—" She trailed off, the weight of their experiences evident in her eyes. Sarah reached out and gently squeezed her arm, offering a sympathetic look. "I know," she said softly. "We've all been through hell, but you're safe here for now. We can share our resources and work together to improve our chances of survival." Chris, ever the tactical thinker, interjected. "Speaking of which, we've been scouting the area and have identified a potential stronghold, the Plaza Hotel. It's well stocked and heavily fortified, but it's currently under the control of a rival group. We're planning an assault to take it back. Could use your help." Maria's eyes widened at the mention of the Plaza Hotel, and she exchanged a quick glance with Danny. "The Plaza Hotel, you say? We might be able to help with that. Danny knows the city's underground tunnels better than anyone. They could provide a way to infiltrate the hotel without being detected." Danny stepped forward, his gaze meeting Chris's with a newfound sense of purpose. "I can show you the best routes and entry points, but it won't be easy. That gang is ruthless, and they've turned the hotel into a fortress." Sarah could see the determination in Danny's eyes, and she knew that with his knowledge and Maria's medical expertise, their chances of success would be greatly improved. She turned to the group, her voice steady and commanding. "Then it's settled. We'll work together to take back the Plaza Hotel and establish it as our stronghold. We'll need to plan the operation carefully, but with all of our skills combined, I believe we can pull it off." The group nodded in agreement, the weight of their undertaking evident on their faces. Sarah knew that this was a pivotal moment, a chance to secure a true safe haven, and perhaps even the first step towards reclaiming their city. As the group gathered around the large table in the library's main reading room, they began to hash out the details of their plan. Danny provided detailed maps of the hotel and the surrounding area, highlighting the most vulnerable entry points and the likely locations of the rival gang's defenses. Maria, drawing on her medical experience, offered insights on how to best treat any injuries they might sustain during the assault. Max, ever the technical genius, proposed methods of disabling the gang's security systems and communications, giving them a tactical advantage. Sarah listened intently, her mind racing as she envisioned the complexities of the operation. Chris, with his military training, offered tactical suggestions, and the group debated the merits of each approach, ultimately settling on a plan that they all felt confident in executing. The hours ticked by as they fine-tuned the details, pausing only to scavenge for additional supplies and rations. The library had become a hub of activity, with everyone contributing their unique skills and perspectives to the mission. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the windows, Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of cautious optimism. This ragtag group of survivors had come together, united by a common goal and a determination to reclaim their lives. She knew that the battle ahead would be fierce, that the risks were high, but the alternative, remaining vulnerable and at the mercy of the infected and other desperate individuals, was simply unacceptable. They would fight, and they would win, for the sake of their own survival and the hope of a better future. Sarah caught Chris's eye, and in that moment, she saw the same resolve reflected in his gaze. They had come a long way since their chance encounter, and she knew that they would face the challenges ahead as a team, standing side by side. As the group prepared to turn in for the night, Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in what they had accomplished so far. This was only the beginning, and she was determined to see it through, no matter the cost. Tomorrow, they would march on the Plaza Hotel, ready to take back what was rightfully theirs. With their newfound allies by their side, Sarah felt a renewed sense of hope for the future, a glimmer of light in the darkness that had consumed their world. Chapter 7: Clash of Survivors. The streets of New York had become a battleground, a chaotic symphony of the undead's guttural moans and the desperate cries of the living. In the shadow of the towering Plaza Hotel, a confrontation was brewing, a clash between the survivors who had staked their claim on the strategic location and the rival gang that sought to seize it by force. Sarah, Chris, Max, Maria, and Danny huddled around a hastily assembled map, their expressions tense as they finalized their plan of attack. The Plaza Hotel represented their best chance at establishing a fortified stronghold, and they were determined to wrest control from the ruthless gang that had taken it over. "All right, listen up," Sarah said, her voice commanding attention. "Danny, you said there's an underground tunnel system that leads right into the hotel's basement, correct?" Danny nodded, his eyes shining with a newfound sense of purpose. "That's right. I used to explore those tunnels as a kid. They're a maze, but I think I can guide us in without being detected." "Good." Sarah turned to Chris. "Chris, you'll lead the assault team. Take Max and secure the main entrance while Danny and I slip in through the tunnels. Maria, you'll stay here and coordinate our efforts from the library." Maria's brow furrowed, but she nodded in understanding. "I'll keep an eye on the situation and provide medical support as needed. Just be careful out there." Chris clasped Sarah's shoulder, his expression grim. "We'll hit them hard and fast. With any luck, we can take back the hotel before they even know we're there." Max tapped a finger on the map, his mind already whirring with possibilities. "I've been monitoring their movements. They've got guards posted at the main entrance and the loading docks. We'll need to find a way to distract them or take them out quietly." "Leave that to me," Danny said, a glint of determination in his eyes. "I know those tunnels like the back of my hand. I can get you in without them seeing a thing." The group fell silent, the weight of their decision heavy in the air. They knew the risks, the dangers that lay ahead, but the allure of the Plaza Hotel's resources and the promise of a true stronghold was too enticing to ignore. Sarah took a deep breath, steeling her resolve. "All right, everyone, let's move out. We've got a hotel to take back." The tunnels were dark and damp, the air thick with the stench of rot and decay. Danny led the way, his footsteps sure and confident as he navigated the maze-like passages. Sarah followed closely, her grip tight on her makeshift weapon, a metal pipe she had found during their previous scavenging runs. As they descended deeper underground, the sounds of the city above became muffled, replaced by the eerie silence that permeated the tunnel. Sarah couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease, her heart pounding in her chest. "We're almost there," Danny whispered, glancing back at her. "The entrance to the hotel's basement should be just up ahead." Sarah nodded, her eyes scanning the darkness for any signs of movement. "All right, let's do this." They emerged into a dimly lit basement, the air thick with the stale scent of mold and mildew. Danny swiftly guided Sarah to a set of stairs leading up to the main level, his hand gripping a makeshift crowbar. The gang's main base of operations is on the top floor. Danny murmured, "We'll need to fight our way through the lower levels before we can get to them." Sarah took a deep breath, steadying her nerves. "Lead the way, Danny. I've got your back." As they ascended the stairs, the sound of voices and the occasional gunshot echoed through the hallways, signaling the ongoing battle above. Sarah gripped her pipe tighter, her knuckles turning white as she prepared to join the fray. Meanwhile, Chris, Max, and the assault team approached the main entrance of the Plaza Hotel, their footsteps quick and silent. Chris signaled to his team, his eyes narrow as he surveyed the heavily guarded entrance. "All right, listen up," he whispered. "Max, you and the others will create a distraction at the loading docks. That should draw the majority of the guards away from the main entrance. I'll lead the charge and clear a path for Sarah and Danny." Max nodded, his gaze resolute. "Got it. We'll make sure those guards are good and distracted." Chris turned to the rest of the team, his expression stern. "Remember, our priority is to take back the hotel. Do whatever it takes to secure the entrance, but try to avoid unnecessary casualties if you can." The team members exchanged a series of nods, their weapons at the ready. Chris held up a hand, signaling them to wait, as he peered around the corner, his eyes searching for the optimal moment to strike. Suddenly, a series of loud explosions echoed from the direction of the loading docks, accompanied by the panicked shouts of the gang members. Chris seized the opportunity, leading his team in a swift and coordinated assault on the main entrance. The clash of steel and the crack of gunfire reverberated through the air as the two groups engaged in a fierce battle for control of the hotel. Chris fought with a ruthless efficiency, his training as a Marine shining through as he systematically eliminated the enemy's defenses. Max and the others, meanwhile, had successfully drawn the majority of the gang's forces to the loading docks, engaging them in a chaotic firefight that quickly devolved into a brutal melee. The sound of shattering glass and the roar of the infected added to the chaos as the group fought to maintain their hold on the strategic position. As the battle raged on, Sarah and Danny emerged from the basement, their weapons at the ready. They joined the fray, Sarah's pipe striking with precision and Danny's crowbar crushing skulls with a sickening crunch. The two groups clashed, their strength and determination equally matched, as the fate of the Plaza Hotel hung in the balance. The air was thick with the acrid scent of gunpowder and the metallic tang of blood, adding to the already overwhelming tension. Sarah caught a glimpse of Chris, his face smeared with grime and sweat, as he fought alongside his team. Their eyes met, and in that moment, an unspoken understanding passed between them. They were in this together, united in their quest to secure a safe haven for their group. With renewed vigor, Sarah and Danny pushed forward, their weapons a blur as they carved a path through the enemy's ranks. The sound of their battle cries mingled with the anguished screams of the fallen, creating a harrowing symphony that echoed through the halls of the Plaza Hotel. As the fight dragged on, the group found themselves teetering on the edge of victory and defeat. The gang's leader, a ruthless and cunning individual, had rallied their forces, refusing to relinquish their hold on the prized location. In a desperate gambit, Sarah and Chris coordinated their efforts, leading their teams in a coordinated assault on the gang's stronghold. The clash was brutal, with both sides refusing to back down, but slowly the tide began to turn in the group's favor. With a final, earth-shattering push, the survivors overwhelmed the gang's defenses, finally securing control of the Plaza Hotel. The sounds of the battle slowly faded, replaced by the heavy breathing of the exhausted combatants and the eerie silence that settled over the once grand building. Sarah, Chris, Max, Maria, and Danny stood amidst the carnage, their weapons still at the ready. They had won, but the cost had been high, and the weight of their victory weighed heavily on their shoulders. As they surveyed the damage, Sarah's gaze met Chris's, and in that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. They had faced the ultimate test and emerged victorious, but the true challenge now lay in transforming the Plaza Hotel into a stronghold that could withstand the ravages of the post-apocalyptic world. The group's journey was far from over, but in that moment, They knew that their unity and determination had been forged in the crucible of this battle. With a newfound sense of purpose, they turned their attention to the task of fortifying their newfound sanctuary, determined to carve out a safe haven in the midst of the chaos that had engulfed their beloved city. Chapter 8: Fortress of Hope. The Plaza Hotel loomed before them, its grand facade standing in stark contrast to the crumbling city around it. Sarah, Chris, Max, Maria, and Danny stood at the ornate entrance, surveying the fortified structure that was now their hard-won stronghold. After the intense battle with the rival gang, the exhausted group had secured control of the hotel, transforming it into a bastion of hope in the midst of the post-apocalyptic chaos. As they stepped through the revolving doors, a sense of cautious optimism filled the air. "We did it," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We actually did it." Chris placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "With a little luck, this place can be a sanctuary for us and any other survivors we find." The group navigated the grand lobby, their footsteps echoing against the marble floors. Sarah couldn't help but marvel at the opulence that still remained, a stark reminder of the world they had lost. "All right, team," Maria said, taking charge. "Let's get to work. We need to assess the damage, secure the building, and start organizing our resources." The group split up, each member tackling a different task. Sarah and Chris swept the hotel, ensuring there were no remaining threats. Max busied himself with the security systems, setting up cameras and motion sensors to monitor the perimeter. Maria and Danny took inventory of the medical supplies and food stores, planning how to ration and distribute them. As the day wore on, the group's exhaustion began to fade, replaced by a sense of cautious optimism. They had survived the initial onslaught and emerged victorious, but they knew the true test would be in maintaining their newfound stronghold. That evening, the group gathered in the hotel's grand ballroom, which they had cleared of debris and converted into a communal living space. They shared a simple meal of canned goods and discussed their next steps. "We need to secure the rooftop and set up some kind of greenhouse or garden," Max said, gesturing with his hands as he spoke. "If we want to be self-sustaining, we'll need a reliable source of fresh food." Maria nodded in agreement. "And we should convert one of the lower-level floors into a medical ward. I want to start studying the virus, see if there's any way we can develop a treatment or cure." The group fell silent, the weight of their situation settling in. Sarah could see the exhaustion and uncertainty in their eyes, but also a renewed determination. "We'll do it," she said, her voice steady. "We'll make this work. We have to." Chris placed a hand on Sarah's arm, offering a small smile. "She's right. We've come this far, and we're not giving up now." Over the next few days, the group sprang into action, transforming the Plaza Hotel into a fortified stronghold. They cleared the rooftop and began planting a makeshift garden, utilizing the hotel's existing greenhouse and hydroponic systems. Max rigged up an intricate security network, linking the cameras and motion sensors to a central command center. Maria and Danny set up a medical ward in one of the lower-level ballrooms, equipped with the supplies they had scavenged. They began the arduous task of studying the virus, poring over medical texts, and experimenting with various compounds. Meanwhile, Sarah and Chris organized the survivors, establishing a system of patrols, resource allocation, and communal duties. They knew that maintaining order and cooperation would be crucial to their long-term survival. As the days turned into weeks, the group slowly settled into a routine. They scavenged the surrounding blocks for additional supplies, fortified the hotel's defenses, and worked to create a semblance of normality in their new home. One evening, as the group gathered for a meal, Sarah noticed a shift in the atmosphere. The tension that had once permeated the air had dissipated, replaced by a sense of camaraderie and belonging. "I never thought I'd feel safe in a place like this," Danny said, his voice tinged with disbelief. "But it actually feels like a home." Maria reached over and squeezed her brother's hand. "We've all been through so much, but we're still here. That's what matters." Max nodded in agreement, a rare smile spreading across his face. "And we're not just surviving, we're building something, a community." Chris leaned back in his chair, his gaze sweeping across the group. "It's not easy, but we're making it work. We're stronger together." Sarah felt a surge of pride and relief. Against all odds, they had transformed the Plaza Hotel into a sanctuary, a beacon of hope in the midst of the chaos. It was not just a fortress, but a place where they could find solace, support, and the strength to face the uncertain future. Over the following weeks, the group continued to expand their secure zone, sending out scouting parties to search for additional survivors and resources. They established a system of community governance, with Sarah, Chris, and Maria taking on leadership roles. Max worked tirelessly to maintain and improve the hotel's defenses, while Danny and Maria's medical team made strides in understanding the virus. Slowly but surely, the group built a sustainable and secure environment where they could begin to heal and rebuild. One afternoon, as Sarah stood on the rooftop garden, she gazed out over the changed city. The once vibrant streets were now littered with debris and abandoned vehicles, but the Plaza Hotel stood tall, its lights shining through the haze. "We made it," she whispered, a sense of wonder and pride filling her chest. Chris joined her, his presence a familiar and comforting anchor. "We did, and we're going to keep fighting, for ourselves, for our new family, and for the future." Sarah nodded, her gaze resolute. "No matter what comes our way, we'll face it together. This is our home now." As the sun began to set, painting the skyline in hues of gold and crimson, the group gathered on the rooftop, silent but united. They knew that the challenges ahead would be daunting, but in that moment they felt a glimmer of hope. Hope for a future where they could reclaim their humanity and rebuild the world they had lost. Chapter 9. Threats from within and without. Tensions simmered within the fortified walls of the Plaza Hotel as the survivors faced new challenges on multiple fronts. Resources were dwindling, tempers flared, and the ever-present threat of the infected lurked just beyond their defenses. Sarah, having emerged as the group's de facto leader, found herself mediating conflicts and trying to maintain order amidst the growing strain. The diverse personalities and varying needs of the survivors tested her resolve, but she remained determined to keep the community united and focused on their ultimate goal of survival. One morning, as Sarah made her rounds, she noticed a heated exchange between Chris and Max. The two men, once united by their shared drive to protect the group, now butted heads over the allocation of supplies and the direction of their long-term plans. "We need to divert more resources into fortifying the rooftop defenses," Chris argued, his brow furrowed with concern. "The infected are becoming bolder, and I don't want to risk another breach." Max, his arms crossed defiantly, shook his head. "That's short-sighted, Chris. We should be investing in expanding our food production and medical research. Those are the keys to our long-term survival." Sarah stepped between the two men, raising her hands in a calming gesture. "Gentlemen, I understand your concerns, but we need to find a balanced approach. Chris, your focus on security is valid, but Max also raises important points about our long-term sustainability." The pair reluctantly nodded, acknowledging Sarah's mediation, but the underlying tension remained palpable. As the day wore on, Sarah made her way to the makeshift medical ward, where Maria and Danny were hard at work. The siblings had become indispensable members of the group. With Maria's medical expertise and Danny's knowledge of the city's underground tunnels proving invaluable. "Any updates on the virus?" Sarah asked, her expression a mixture of hope and trepidation. Maria sighed, pushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "I've been studying the samples, but I'm still no closer to understanding the full extent of the virus or finding a potential cure. The infection seems to mutate too quickly for us to keep up." Danny, his eyes narrowed with concentration, chimed in. "We've been mapping out the tunnel system, and it's extensive, but the infected are using them as well, and we can't risk venturing too far without a clear plan." Sarah nodded, her mind racing with the weight of their predicament. "Keep working on it, both of you. We need to find a way to turn the tide." As Sarah left the medical ward, a faint rumbling echoed through the hotel. She hurried to the command center, where Max was frantically monitoring the security systems. "What's happening?" Sarah demanded, her heart pounding with adrenaline. "A massive horde of infected," Max reported, his fingers flying across the keyboards. "They're massing outside the hotel, and our defenses are already under strain." Sarah quickly gathered the group, relaying the dire situation. Chris, his eyes hardening with determination, immediately sprang into action. All right, listen up. We need to shore up the barriers and prepare for a full-scale assault. Max, divert all available power to the perimeter defenses. Maria, Danny, get the medical supplies ready. The rest of you, arm yourselves and take up defensive positions. The group sprung into motion, each member fulfilling their designated role with a sense of urgency and purpose. Sarah took her place alongside Chris, her eyes scanning the horizon for the first signs of the approaching horde. The infected soon arrived in a tidal wave of snarls and rotting flesh, throwing themselves at the hotel's fortifications. The group fought with a ferocity born of desperation, firing weapons and hurling makeshift projectiles to stem the tide. Sarah's heart raced as she watched the defenses begin to buckle under the relentless assault. She knew they couldn't hold out forever, and the thought of the infected breaching their sanctuary filled her with dread. Suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the ground, and Sarah whirled around to see a gaping hole in the hotel's western wall. The infected poured through the opening, their crazed eyes fixed on the survivors. "Fall back!" Chris bellowed, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We need to regroup and seal the breach." The group retreated, fighting a desperate rearguard action as they fell back towards the hotel's central atrium. Sarah could see the fear and exhaustion etched on her comrades' faces, but they refused to give up. In the midst of the battle, Sarah caught sight of the rival gang leader, a sinister figure who had been observing the chaos from the sidelines. The gang leader's lips curled into a cruel smile, and Sarah knew that they were taking advantage of the group's vulnerability. "Max, we need to seal that breach," Sarah shouted, her voice strained with effort as she fought off a pair of infected. "Can you rig up something to block the opening?" Max's eyes widened with understanding, and he quickly darted away, his mind already whirring with a plan. Minutes later, a series of explosions rocked the area around the breach, and Sarah watched in relief as the opening was sealed, trapping the infected outside. The group took a moment to catch their breath, but the respite was short-lived. The rival gang leader emerged from the shadows, a malicious grin on his face. Well, look who's finally dropped their guard. This is the perfect opportunity to take what's ours." Chris stepped forward, his weapon raised. "Over my dead body. This is our home, and we won't let you take it." The gang leader let out a chilling laugh. "That can be arranged." What followed was a brutal close-quarters battle as the two groups clashed, each fighting for control of the hotel. Sarah fought with every ounce of her strength, her focus narrowing to the task at hand. She watched in horror as some of her comrades fell, their screams mingling with the snarls of the infected. In the chaos, Sarah caught sight of Maria tending to the wounded, her face etched with determination. The nurse's hands moved with practiced efficiency, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to the pandemonium around her. Danny, too, proved himself a valuable asset, using his knowledge of the hotel's layout to outmaneuver the rival gang and guide the survivors to safety. Sarah felt a surge of pride in her newfound family, their resilience and teamwork fueling her own resolve. As the battle raged on, Sarah caught a glimpse of the rival gang leader attempting to retreat. Without hesitation, she gave chase, her legs pumping as she pursued the fleeing figure. The chase led them to the hotel's rooftop garden, a verdant oasis that had become a crucial part of their self-sustaining ecosystem. Sarah and the gang leader grappled, their weapons clashing as they each fought for the upper hand. In a desperate move, the gang leader produced a knife and lunged towards Sarah. She reacted instinctively, her training as a paramedic taking over. With a swift motion, she disarmed the gang leader and tackled him to the ground, pinning him down. "It's over," Sarah growled, her eyes blazing with a mixture of fury and relief. "Your reign of terror ends here." The gang leader spat in her face, his expression a twisted mask of defiance. "You think you've won? This is only the beginning. There are others out there, and they won't stop until they've taken everything from you." Sarah's grip tightened, her knuckles turning white. "Then we'll be ready. We'll fight them all, no matter the cost." The sound of footsteps behind her drew Sarah's attention, and she turned to see Chris and the others joining her on the rooftop. The group surrounded the fallen gang leader, their expressions a mixture of triumph and grim resolve. As they surveyed the damage and tended to the wounded, Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose. The battle had been hard won, but it had forged their group into an even stronger, more cohesive unit. They had faced their greatest challenge yet and emerged victorious, and Sarah knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together. With a deep breath, she turned to her comrades, her voice steady and determined. "This is our home now, and we'll defend it to the last. No matter what comes our way, we'll face it as a family. We've survived this far, and will continue to survive, no matter the cost." The group nodded in agreement, their eyes reflecting the same unwavering resolve. They had found their sanctuary, and they would fight to the bitter end to protect it. Chapter 10: A New Dawn. The plaza glowed with the warmth of the rising sun, casting a golden hue over the fortified hotel that had become the survivors' stronghold. Sarah stood on the rooftop, gazing out at the transformed city, her eyes reflecting the cautious hope that had taken root within her. It had been months since the harrowing siege at the Plaza Hotel, where their group had fought against the ruthless rival gang and secured their place as the dominant force in this new, post-apocalyptic world. The battle had been fierce, testing the limits of their endurance and determination, but in the end, their unity had prevailed. As Sarah took a deep breath, she could feel the weight of her responsibility settle on her shoulders. She had emerged as the natural leader of this diverse group, her unwavering determination and compassion inspiring the others to follow her lead. The journey had been arduous, filled with moments of triumph and despair, but through it all, their bond had only grown stronger. Turning to survey the bustling activity below, Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. The Plaza Hotel had been transformed into a thriving community, a beacon of hope in the otherwise bleak and desolate landscape. The group had worked tirelessly to establish a sustainable system, utilizing the hotel's resources to provide food, shelter, and medical care for all who sought refuge within its walls. Sarah's gaze drifted to the rooftop gardens, where Maria and Danny tended to the crops with a quiet determination. The addition of the siblings had been a game changer, with Maria's medical expertise and Danny's knowledge of the city's underground passageways proving invaluable. Together, they had built a robust network of supply lines and a comprehensive system for treating the injured and the ill. Further down, Sarah could see Chris and Max overseeing the fortifications and security measures that kept their stronghold safe. Chris, once burdened by the guilt of his past, had found renewed purpose in protecting the group, his military training and tactical prowess proving essential in their battles against the infected and rival factions. Max, the socially awkward tech genius, had shed his isolationist tendencies, embracing the value of teamwork and using his skills to create a state-of-the-art security network that kept their home secure. As Sarah watched her friends and comrades go about their daily tasks, she couldn't help but marvel at the transformation they had all undergone. They were no longer just a collection of strangers thrust together by circumstance, but a family bound by shared experiences and a common goal: to survive and rebuild in this broken world. A sudden movement caught Sarah's eye, and she saw a group of survivors approaching the hotel's gates. She tensed, her hand instinctively moving towards the holster at her side, but then she recognized the faces. It was a party from one of the other survivor communities they had made contact with in recent weeks. Relaxing her stance, Sarah made her way down to the ground level, greeting the newcomers with a warm smile. They had established tentative alliances with a few nearby groups, recognizing the importance of cooperation and the sharing of resources in these trying times. It was a delicate balance, navigating the politics and power dynamics of the various factions, but Sarah was determined to forge connections that would benefit them all. As the new arrivals were welcomed into the hotel, Sarah took a moment to reflect on how far they had come. The initial chaos and panic of the virus outbreak seemed like a distant memory, replaced by a sense of purpose and belonging. Their journey had been arduous, but it had also forged unbreakable bonds between them. "You look deep in thought," a familiar voice said, and Sarah turned to see Chris standing beside her, his once hardened features now softened by a hint of contentment. "Just taking it all in," Sarah replied, gesturing to the bustling activity around them. It's hard to believe we've come this far. Chris nodded, his gaze sweeping across the community. We've built something truly remarkable here. A safe haven in the midst of all this chaos. It's more than that, Sarah said, her voice tinged with a quiet conviction. It's a symbol of hope, a reminder that we can rebuild, that we can reclaim our humanity, even in the face of such overwhelming adversity. Chris turned to her, a newfound respect and admiration shining in his eyes. And you've been the driving force behind it all, Sarah. Your courage, your compassion, it's what's kept us going through the darkest of times. Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest, a testament to the trust and camaraderie that had blossomed between them. We all played a part, she said, her gaze drifting to the others. This is our home, our community. We built it together. The two of them stood in comfortable silence, watching as the members of their group interacted with the newcomers, sharing stories and offering assistance. In that moment, Sarah felt a profound sense of gratitude for the people she had come to call family, for the resilience they had shown, and for the possibility of a future that, despite the odds, still glimmered with hope. As the day wore on, the group gathered in one of the hotel's grand ballrooms, where a makeshift memorial had been erected to honor those they had lost along the way. Sarah, Chris, Max, Maria, and Danny, the core of their ragtag band of survivors, stood side by side, their eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and determination. One by one, they stepped forward, sharing the stories of those who had fallen, the brave souls who had sacrificed themselves to protect the group, the loved ones who had succumbed to the ravages of the virus. It was a solemn ceremony, a chance to grieve and to remember, but also to draw strength from the memories of those who had come before them. As the last candle was lit, a hush fell over the room, broken only by the occasional sniffle. Sarah felt a hand slip into hers, and she looked up to see Chris, his expression one of quiet understanding. In that moment, she knew that they would carry on, not only for themselves, but for all those who had perished, their legacies etched into the very foundations of the community they had built. In the days that followed, the group turned their attention to the future, mapping out plans for expansion and exploration. They knew that the city still held many dangers, but they were determined to reclaim as much of it as possible, to find other survivors and build a network of safe havens that would offer refuge to those in need. Sarah, Chris, Max, Maria, and Danny, the core of their group, gathered around a table, their heads bent in discussion as they pored over maps and strategized their next move. The tension and uncertainty of the past had not been erased, but it had been tempered by the knowledge that they were stronger together, that their unity was their greatest weapon against the challenges that still lay ahead. As the meeting drew to a close, Sarah stood, her gaze sweeping over the faces of her friends and comrades. "We've come so far, and we've sacrificed so much," she said, her voice carrying a weight that belied her years. "But we're still here, and we're going to keep fighting, for ourselves, for our community, and for the chance to rebuild something better from the ashes of this broken world." A murmur of agreement rippled through the group, and Sarah felt a surge of pride and gratitude. They had weathered the storm, and now they were poised to forge a new path forward, one that would demand all of their courage, resilience, and determination. With a renewed sense of purpose, the group set to work, their footsteps echoing through the halls of the Plaza Hotel as they embarked on the next chapter of their journey. Sarah, standing at the heart of it all, knew that they were not simply surviving, they were reclaiming their humanity, and in doing so, they were paving the way for a future that held the promise of hope.